Yeah, make a
Okay,
start, James, if you want.
yeah, I'll make a start. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's great to see so many people on the call, so thank you, everybody. So we'll go around and ask everyone to introduce because there's too many of you. But if you do speak during the Q&A, it'd be nice if you can just say who you are and your name and let us know who you are. So I'm James Greenwood, and I'm a strategy and transformation manager for Bradford District and Craven. But my background actually was a physiotherapist, and I worked in Leeds. And none of that has made me an expert in neurodiversity at all. And all I can here talk about is my own lived experience. And the reason how I ended up looking at this was because I recently completed an apprenticeship management degree at Manchester Metropolitan University. As part of that degree process, I had to review a policy at work, and it's not the most exciting thing in the world. So I decided to look at recruitment policies and how that impacts people with neurodiversity. And because I am dyslexic, I found it such an enlightening experience. Like, it was really like mind-blowing opening. So I've come today just kind of give you my thoughts and what I found. So I do have a slide pack, but hopefully it's not going to be a bit death by PowerPoint, and I hopefully want to have that kind of open dialogue with you all. Just share my screen now. Right, hopefully you can all see that. I can't see any of you. So first thing you'll notice is that font, which my partner basically described as awful. And to be fair, it does put Comic Sans to shame, but this is actually a specially designed font, which helps people who have dyslexia read. It's called Open Dyslexia, and it's really helped me, having discovered this only in the past couple of weeks. It's made me that I can read stuff so much easier. So as you like go through the slides, you actually might find it really hard, and actually might find it really overwhelming, which kind of is what neurodiverse people can find when reading normal text. So hopefully it kind of gives you a bit of a glimpse into what it's like. And also the slide background, it's super busy as well. And again, that's intentional because I want you to be overstimulated, just to give you a bit of a glimpse of what it kind of be like. So you notice the title is actually different as well to what you're all signed up for. And this is because I really struggled to begin as to where I started with this presentation. I wrote a 3,000 word essay on it, and I thought, oh, it was dead easy to put that into a presentation, but it was really hard. And so I didn't know where to start with structure. So I turned to AI to help me out. And this is what AI gave me this title. And I loved it because it speaks so much volumes. It's very very descriptive, and that's kind of how neurodiverse people work within the brain. And I think it spoke loads that we have things like AI now in business, and we have further technologies, but our recruitment process hasn't actually changed. And so you got to think, is this recruitment process still fit for the 21st century? Particularly now, we're seeing so much increases of people who are diagnosed with neurodiversity. I think in America, there's been a 600% increase in the past 2 years for those who have autism. So if we don't start changing this recruitment process, then we're going to miss out on a load of talent. So what is kind of neurodiversity to begin with? The neurodiversity is like an umbrella term, and it describes a range of different conditions which impacts upon a person's brain function. And usually these conditions impact how someone's ability to interpret, perceive, and interact with kind of the world around them. Some of the really like common conditions which fall under this umbrella are dyslexia, which is what I have. And this is tend to be defined as a weakness in short-term memory, kind of problems with sequencing and phonological skills, and affects reading and writing ability. But dyslexic people may have lacking this reading and writing, but we have strengths in kind of visual reasoning, creativity, and kind of practical skills. Autism also falls under that neurodiversity umbrella, and that's a developmental disability, where there's a triad of impairments, and where people tend to find it difficult to have social communication, social interaction, and social imagination. But they also have strengths in memory ability, kind of specialized individual skills, quite innovative thinkers, and are quite detailed observations. ADHD also falls under neurodiversity banner, and that stands for attention deficit hyperactive disorder. And they have kind of difficulties with attention and kind of impulse control. But for them, they are often quite creative thinkers. They're quite passionate, have this uber hyper focus. So with all these conditions of neurodiversity, there is a spectrum, and no one neurodiverse person is the same. And it's often the case when someone who is neurodiverse with one condition, they may have another. So some people are often dyslexic with a bit of autism, or they might have ADHD with autism as well. And so each person's really unique. But what is key is that neurodiverse people can often kind of see a different side to a problem. It's often really good at kind of innovative and problem solving. So for the workplace, it's fantastic. And some of the most successful people in history and the world are actually neurodiverse. So Bill Gates he has dyslexia and ADHD. Simone Biles, she's a US gymnast, she's got ADHD. Steve Jobs, he's dyslexic. Whoopi Goldberg, she's dyslexic. Tim Burton has autism, and Albert Einstein, he had ADHD and dyslexia. So we're actually like really great people. But as much as it would be to employ all these people in the NHS, we can't do that. But the evidence actually says that employing neurodiverse people actually helps to improve healthcare services, because neurodiverse people have that lived experience of what it's like to be neurodiverse. And in my research, quickly found there's evidence that suggests that insufficient healthcare recruitment can actually lead to health inequalities. And health inequality is one of the key strategic organisations aims that we want to reduce in Bradford. So it's key that we need to get this recruitment process right. So traditional job interviews, though, have shown to be biased against people with neurodiversity. And studies have actually proven to this factually correct. A reason for this is mainly because the successful attributes of an interview are actually challenging for neurodiverse people, kind of maintaining eye contact, quickly responding to questions, and asking thought-provoking questions, and reciprocating non-verbal cues are all kind of key things which make an interview successful, and they can be quite difficult. Plus, even the physical environment of which an interview takes place can actually be proven to actually lower the performance of someone who has neurodiversity, such as the time taken for an interview, the lighting, the noise in the room, and also the room layout. And it's reasonable to assume that these difficulties will be intensified in the kind of virtual interviews as well, because in the virtual, there's lots of stimulus and information to process all at the same time. So having so much of that visual feedback all at once can actually affect performance. But that hasn't been studied yet in terms of the visual impact, so that needs to be taken with caution. And then there's also psychometric testing. So for those who don't know what that is, that's kind of like cognitive testing before you even get to an interview. And so a lot of employers do it. It's not very common in the NHS, but it's been proven that people who have neurodiversity are already disadvantaged by doing them tests. And I even myself have not applied for roles because they're required to have these tests, because I fear that I wouldn't even pass it because I really struggle with it. But suppose underlying to probably why I didn't take that test is because of that fear of being discriminated against by disclosing that I'm neurodiverse. Now, I actually see being neurodiverse as an absolute gift, and I don't worry about declaring it, but that's taken a while. And only in my previous role that I applied for was the first time I actually declared it, which is silly. I've been applied for many jobs for in the past. But that actually is common. Many people don't declare that they've got neurodiversity because they fear they're going to get discriminated against, which is kind of a really vicious circle, because if you don't declare you've got neurodiversity and we need that reasonable adjustment, then that reasonable adjustments can't be implemented. But neurodiverse people have a reason to fear that, because there is evidence to show that interviewers do have an unconscious preference for people who are not neurodiverse candidates. But that's just looking at it from the candidate's point of view, because part of my policy research, I had to look at it from different perspectives. And I looked at someone from a managerial point of view, and the research again was really interesting. A lot of the managers involved in recruitment of the research I looked at, they didn't feel comfortable or felt confident in deploying what reasonable adjustments is for someone who's neurodiverse. And there's lots of unconscious kind of bias associated with having to apply reasonable adjustments for someone who's neurodiverse, and how that impacts on the perception of that person even before going into interview. So it's a really kind of vicious circle. So But it's important to remember that neurodiverse people aren't just neurodiverse. And if we're really going to unravel the recruitment process, we need to acknowledge this concept of intersectionality. Now, I'd never heard of intersectionality before I did this policy, but intersectionality is how somebody's aspects of someone's life and how their social and political identities combine to create different modes of privilege or discrimination. So for me, because I am dyslexic and I am gay, I could face discrimination. But overall, I'm a white man, I'm able-bodied, my first language is English, because that stands me in a really position of privilege. So a really good exercise which you can do is actually, if you look at the wheel of power, just give it a Google, and you can see kind of where your privilege and discrimination is. So if you're involved in that recruitment process, it's really important to be aware of that, because all these factors play a huge part in the inequality process during the recruitment. And it's important to acknowledge that despite so much advancement, discrimination still occurs in recruitment. So shockingly, in 2020, the Guardian newspaper ran a story of report which highlighted that candidates with typical white-sounding names, such as like John, James, Alison, were actually more likely to be shortlisted for an NHS role than their counterparts. So when you consider all of this together, it's reasonable to assume that someone who is neurodiverse and has a protected characteristic are more likely to face further discrimination. So if you are interested in finding out more about intersectionality, because once you start getting into it, I find it really interesting. There's a great book called Girl, Woman and Other. And for me, that really highlighted the concept of intersectionality through different short stories. So before I move on, I've had enough of me talking for a bit. So I just wanted to kind of like open the floor, see if anyone had any questions or comments. Anybody? Anything in the chat? I'll have a check for the chat.
Yeah, there's a couple, James, in the chat. We've had one that said they wanted to be a police officer, but felt like they wouldn't pass the tests. And then we've got another comment saying, I wanted to be a doctor, but without a dyslexia, ADHD, or autism diagnosis, I had no chance of getting the grades I needed. And I finally did get the diagnosis and support. I completed a master's in physics.
Yeah, it's people who have neurodiverse have the ability to do just as well as like non-neurodiverse candidates, but it's having that platform and having that discussion. The world is built for people who are neurotypical, and we need to start maybe looking at it slightly differently and not denying people the opportunities and saying, yes, we can start doing that rather than not doing it. Because I think that's especially the school system, like you can't do that, you can't go to the police, you can't be a doctor. Yeah, it's shocking, but hopefully now people are becoming more aware of it. Yes, and the book is Girl, Woman, Other. It's a fantastic book. Please give it a read.
We've got a hand up as well. Sorry, James.
Yeah.
We've got a hand up from Pauline. If you want to take the floor.
Thank you. Sorry, James. It was a late hand up. I was thinking about my question. I work for the North East Ambulance Service. I'm the chair of the Staff Disability Network, ABLE at NEAS. And you might be going to answer this, so forgive me if I've jumped the gun a little bit. I get asked a lot about how best to support staff with reasonable adjustments, and I think the topic of neurodiversity, we're going to look at that next year as a priority. I think it scares a lot of managers because, like you've said, they don't really know, they don't really understand, they don't have the confidence they don't want to misstep, they don't get it wrong. In your experience, what would you say, regardless of which neurodiversity somebody has, are there any really good best practice adjustments you could make in the recruitment process that, I know it's not one size fits all, I get that, but are there any good generic, look, if you do A, B and C, you're on the right path? What would you think?
I'll come on to it if you want. It's part of the next part.
It's like I know, isn't it?
It's like I know. It's like you planted this.
That's
this
totally.
Yeah.
You're welcome. I'll get that 10 quid off you later, mate.
Yeah. Yeah, so exactly. So moving on, how can we actually ensure that we make this fair recruitment process fair and equal? But before I kind of like go into that, I need to let everyone know that this actually area of research is actually considered immersive and modern, which is really shocking in itself. So that actually the research is really limited, and it hasn't really been specifically studied within healthcare. So that's kind of just something important to remember. But a lot of the research refers to traditional hiring methods, which is kind of classed as sitting behind a desk, a couple of people, and the candidate in front of you. So, and I believe a lot of the NHS still does that. So at the moment, you've got to think about, firstly, someone's got to be confident enough to disclose, and that's a huge thing. And when you make, and then once they've disclosed, then how do you make them reasonable adjustments? So I've already highlighted that research shows that managers aren't very confident in applying that reasonable adjustments. So a solution could be, and I know some organisations do this, and I know Manchester Metropolitan University would do it because I've had these adjustments done in the past. That for once they say, right, you're dyslexic or you've got autism or you've got ADHD, then these are the type of adjustments that within an interview that you should be using. But I personally feel that could actually create further inequalities because, as I said, everyone is so different and everyone's so unique and everyone has different strengths and weaknesses and it's all on a spectrum. For example, this font is like a prime example. I absolutely love it. It's completely like changed my life. It's great. But I've spoken to somebody who is also dyslexic and showed them this font because I've been like, look at this. It's fantastic. I can actually read loads of papers. And that makes them feel sick when they read this. So if we went for a job and the adjustment was provide this font, then that's inequality between us two as candidates going to it. So it's quite hard to be dictative of what is reasonable adjustments. And kind of a more modern approach, and I looked at 2 papers, and again, I'm happy to share my research after this. So there was papers produced in 2020 and in 2023, which actually looked at providing reasonable adjustments to all candidates, regardless of diagnosis. This is kind of positive because it actually removes that fear of discrimination by disclosing, and also removes some of that unconscious bias associated with that emotional labour, which kind of managers may feel I've got to put on these reasonable adjustments. But when I kind of read about this, some people might have seen this picture before with the trees. I did question, like, is this a method to actually provide equality? Because it actually may fail to provide justice given the kind of like current inequalities. But in both of these studies, they actually didn't find any significant difference between the scores of neurodiverse candidates and actually neurotypical candidates. And locally within Bradford and Bradford District and Craven, this idea is actually being piloted and tested. So Airedale Hospital, who's been doing some amazing work, they are really championing around inclusivity and neurodiversity recruitment and just neurodiversity in all. Freya, who I believe is on the call, has been a real champion when it comes to this. And for their rotational physiotherapy posts, they actually provided half the questions in advance to all the candidates. Now, overall, I believe it was a really positive process. First of all, it maximised performance across the board, and they did acknowledge that actually it took a lot longer, so it's more time consuming, but you've got to invest more time. And actually, it was much harder to pick the right candidates, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, and we shouldn't really be rushing these recruitment processes, particularly for more like permanent roles. So it's important to remember that, though, if you do make any adjustments just to an interview process, just remember that concept of intersectionality. You can't just make adjustments for people who are neurodiverse and not forget the wider, bigger picture. So what can you really do now? So just firstly, thank you for coming. I'm just so amazed by how many people turned up. I literally thought it would just be a couple of people, but to see there's 37 people on the call is fantastic. And that's a great step that you've come to like learn and to understand about neurodiversity. But hopefully you can then start to recognise the fact that you may have neurodiverse colleagues already, because it's not just the recruitment process you need to look at, it's the overall bigger picture. So I think just have a bit of a check-in with yourself after this call and think, do I always need to send an email? Do I need to send long, big documents and PDF files that can't be edited or modified, which I know we have to do for kind of governance reasons at times, but it can be really hard to then apply this font, which I've been using, onto a PDF. And I know Bradford Royal Infirmary as well are doing some really good works around this, because a lot of the information that we get given is in that leaflet, in paper form, in written documents. But in the Bradford Virtual Royal Infirmary, they are providing more videos, and that's great because people can watch it in their own time. Even those who aren't neurodiverse, it's probably quite good for them. And finally, if you are involved in the recruitment process, or know anyone is, it'd just be quite good just to start challenging people to see how they are making it more inclusive. So thank you, everybody, for attending. That has been a whistle-stop tour because I didn't want to bore you all and try and give you some time, but